Picking up where we left off with vertex painting, I want to talk to you about deferred decals, using decals to help bring additional look and style into your scenes without using up a tremendous amount of memory. For example, if I was creating a street scene and I created asphalt, which is kind of the texture that I have down here now. I just went and downloaded a seamless photograph of asphalt, and I created a normal map for that, and I put it down here, so it just looks like asphalt. You'll notice it looks pretty clean, pretty normal, and not really unlike most streets you've ever seen. Most streets that we have seen have oil stains, they've got cracks, they've got broken areas where you see dirt and rocks and sometimes the potholes. So you actually have the dirt that's underneath the street. You have little grasses and stuff growing up through cracks. Where the concrete on the gutter meets the street, there's almost always overlapping or cracks or seams or things like that. There's all kinds of things that you see normally that make up a street. Here's the problem that we have. This becomes a giant headache when I'm trying to create a texture. I'm trying to cover this much ground with the asphalt. So if I had a street scene and I needed, and this is a really small street scene, there's not much street there. If I were to do that, I would have to create a ginormous material in Photoshop that contained that texture and then contained cracks and breaks and rocks and pebbles and grease stains and all kinds of stuff. And then, as we've seen when we're dealing with repetitious objects and repetitious materials, if I started cloning that street all up and down the place, I would have the same oil stains repeating, the same cracks repeating. And yes, I could go in and do vertex painting, but the problem with vertex painting in the case of something like this, when you're dealing with a really large object, is remember these walls, these two copies of the walls, contain a lot of polygons, which it's easy to get away with when I'm only dealing with something that's this big. If I were to put as many polygons on this floor, this ground plane, as I have in that wall, and then I wanted to create a big street scene and I had 10 or 15 of these things running down a big wide, maybe it's a 4-lane street with sidewalks, I would be running out of memory so quickly you wouldn't believe it. So that's not really practical. Vertex painting is not practical when you're trying to go in and to do that. What is practical, however, is something called a decal. And what a decal is it is only a texture. And it's a texture that's applied to a decal projector. And what it does is it overrides, when you project a texture, say on a wall or on the ground, it overrides the texture that's there already and displays the texture that you're projecting. Now, that can be done in a couple of ways. Let's say, for example, you want the wall to look like it's got blood sprayed on it, like there's a blood splatter, but you still want to see the texture of the wall coming through, because blood going up there on that wall is not going to destroy that stucco texture or that plaster texture. You're still going to have all of those little pock marks and stuff on there. Or the same thing is true where the bricks are. You're always going to have the bricks separating out, and if I were to splatter blood on it, they would conform to the normal maps that are there to do that. If I look at the ground down here, however, if I put down a manhole cover, I don't want the ground material showing through. I really want the material that I'm going to be projecting down here to override that texture. So those are the two main settings I'm going to have here when dealing with the decal, and it's all handled with how I set my decals up. So I'm going to do something here that involves a manhole cover and then a blood splatter. And I've given you the images. They're out either on the Google Drive, and you have a link to that, or they're downloadable from this particular section of Canvas. So you can follow along and you can do this on your own. The same thing is true of the vertex textures. The bricks and the stucco or the plaster are all out there in both Google Drive and in Canvas, so you can get them and have fun with them and play around with them. So we can do that. I've also, I think, put a whole bunch more manhole covers up there if you want to go in and play with them. Manhole covers, actually the creation of either one of these textures does take a little bit of Photoshop knowledge. And I think what I'll do is I'm going to pause this thing here in just a moment, and I'm going to go back in and show you how I set those textures up. in Photoshop, so you get a sense of how those things were created and why and how they're able to do the things that they do. So I'm going to pause it here and then I'm going to come back. So we're back, and that's a quick change. But what I have here is I have a photograph of a manhole cover. Now, how did I get that photograph of a manhole cover? I just Googled manhole covers, and then I searched. And one of the things you'll find here is that if you're searching for a manhole cover image, more than likely you're really going to have to search hard for them. If I do that, manhole covers over here, and bring it back and look at images and show you, there are manhole covers that are out there. You've got hundreds, thousands of them. Okay, they're colorful. Some of them are real. Some of them are fake. By fake, I mean that they're really just a work of art that somebody has taken and then laid on the ground or painted them up. And they're not real, necessarily, the kinds of stuff you'd see on the street. Most of the ones you see on the street will look like this, or they'll look like this, where they're, you know, they've got asphalt in them and they're really beat up and dinged up. And some of them you got to be careful if you're picking them up and using them. You want to make sure that you're getting ones that represent the place that you're trying to be in. Like, don't go in and pick one that says SPQR. There's one of them in here that has the letters SPQR. That is Roman, which means that it's a manhole cover from Rome, from the Roman Republic. SPQR means, I think, something about it's for the people, so in Latin. And so you don't want to pick up something that's, say, in Japanese or in Chinese or in Italian if you're trying to do a street scene in New York City. They just don't exist. But that's one of the problems. The second problem you're going to run into is if you look at all of these, you'll notice the distortions. Okay, there's a manhole cover. That can't do much with that because it's a perspective view of it. Or you look at this one. That's a perspective view of it. I really need to have a straight top-down shot at what that decal looks like. So you go through here, you'll see some of them, these have watermarks on them, so you really can't use those. Some of them, you look like they think, wow, that's absolutely perfect. It might be slightly off. You may have to go into Photoshop and make adjustments to it. In other cases, you'll find something that looks just absolutely perfect, and they go, but it's cut off. And so you'll have to keep hunting for it. And I managed to find a bunch of them, and I downloaded them all, got them as close to perfect as I can, and I put them out on Google Drive so you have access to them. And the one that I ended up going with was this one, which is from Las Vegas. And the way that I have to take this thing and fix it in Photoshop, and again, I don't know if you have Photoshop skill, let me just show you how I do this. I need to have a channel here that's going to allow me to have invisibility. That's how these things work. So in Photoshop, I have an image that's made up of 3 channels. Red, turn that off. Red, turn that off, that off, that off. I got red, come on, red channel. I have a green channel, and I have a blue channel. Now, you're not seeing them in color because they're really not made up of colors. They're made up of black and white. But when you put the green and the blue channel together, you get this cyan color. If you put the red and green channel together, you get yellow. If you put the red and blue channel together, you get this hot pink. All right, all of them together make the RGB image that you see right here. All right. Now, channels, I'm dealing with layers. I can put additional layers in here. I can also deal with additional channels. In the case of this one, what I would like to have is I would like to have an opacity channel. So in order to get this thing set up, I want this white to be gone. I don't want to see that white out here at all. I just want this round manhole cover. That's all I'm interested in. So what I'm going to do is in my channels list right here, I'm going to go ahead and click. There's a little tiny page icon down here in the bottom right hand corner. I click that and it adds a new alpha channel, which is solid black. Okay. Now I'm going to go back up here to my RGB channel, and I'm going to go back to my layers out here because I'm going to do this in my layers. And I'm going to get my Magic Wand tool. Magic Wand tool makes a selection. It will allow me to click on an area of pixel colors. And this image is made up of nothing but pixels. So if I zoom in, wait for my computer to catch up with what I'm doing here. If I zoom all the way in there, this image is made up of pixels, little square pixels. Every pixel takes up memory. Every pixel is a different color. Okay. What I can do is I can use a magic wand to click on an area that is white. and it selects that area. And an area over here, if I hold down the Shift key, I can click over here. And now I've got this area selected. I can hold the Shift key and click that, and the Shift key and click that. And now I've selected all 4 of those corner areas. And they're made into what's called a selection. I get with what we call little marching ants going around those things. These things are moving. They're a little marching. They don't get any bigger if I zoom in, but they are the little, we call them marching ants going around there. That shows me that I have an area selected. Then what I can do is I can come back over here and I can click on my alpha channel and I can see those things. And you can see the movement of those little things going around. Okay. Then what I can do is I can fill that area with white. Why did I fill it with white? Well, what happens is I need to make areas go invisible. So what I've done is there's only black and white available on these channels. Channels are only black and white, even though when you mix them all together you get color. What I've done is I added in a black channel, and then I added in white areas around the outside of that. White is going to be solid, and black is going to go invisible. So the way that this mask is going to work now is my white areas are going to be visible in my decal, and my black area there is going to be invisible, which is the exact opposite of what I want. I really would like to have this thing be a white circle, but black outside. But I had selected the white outside areas because they were the easiest thing for me to select. When I go back over here and I look at this, that's the easiest thing for me to select. Trying to use my magic wand to click in and around through here would take forever to make a selection if it ever got it accurate. I can click on those white areas really quickly and make the selection. Problem is, when I go to fill in with ink or fill in with color down over here, and the way that I did that was I have 2 colors over here, white and black, on the left-hand side of my screen. I've got white and black. What I do is I hold down the control and the back arrow on my keyboard, and it fills it with a color. So if I were to say, take this and click in there, okay, notice how that filled in. Okay, filled in that way. So Control W fills it in with the background color, the black. Okay, Alt back arrow fills it in with white, which is the foreground arrow. All right, so that was the easiest way for me to get that particular image the way it was. But it's the reverse of what I want. So what I can do is use some of the tools in here in Photoshop that will allow me to go in and take that image and invert it, which is kind of what I want. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go up to Filter, and I'm going to go to, where's my invert? Where is my invert? Well, I'll have to hunt for it, I guess. Yeah, I know where it is. Control I will invert my image. I'm not going to tell you. You can go hunt for it yourself. Control I for invert. We'll take care of that for you. So now I have white and I have black. Black is going to go invisible. White is going to show my texture. There is my alpha channel. Okay, if I go back up here and click on this, I have that. If I turn this on, what I'm going to see is a mask is going to appear. It's going to show me in red the areas that are going to be invisible when I'm done with this image. And that's exactly what I'm looking for. The white there needs to go invisible, and I only want to have that, just that round, the round manhole cover is all I'm looking for. So then I'm going to go up here to File. I'm going to do a Save As. And I talked earlier in here about how we want to save these things, what kind of format we want to use. And I talked about PNGs, PNGs, and Targas, TGAs. Those are the 2 that will allow you to have an alpha channel. A JPEG will not allow for an alpha channel. A JPEG is a flattened, compressed image, and you get what you get. If I sent this out as a JPEG, I would bring it in. I would have white corners on this thing, not transparency. Okay, so I want this thing to remain white. Or excuse me, to be a Targa. So I have this thing all set up. It's going to be a Targa file. I need to make sure Alpha Channels is checked here. I'm going to click Save, and then another window pops up right there. Took a second for it. And this is where you need to make sure that you change this. Targa options, resolution, 16 bits per pixel, 24 bits per pixel, 32 bits per pixel. What does that mean? What it means is, and I'll pull this over here so you can look at these two things side by side. Remember when I was doing a material and I showed you a material 3 constant, or a constant 3 vector, a constant 2 vector, and then just a single constant. A single constant was black and white. A constant vertex 2 was red and green, and then the constant 3 was red, green, and blue. And there was also a constant 4 that contained an alpha channel in it. Okay, we kind of went through that quickly, but I did it. I went through it. So the way I'm applying to it here is 16 bits per pixel. Each channel is made up of an 8-bit per pixel layer, or each channel is 8 bits per pixel. So the red, green, and green channels, the first 2 channels, which would correspond to a constant 2 vector in the material editor in Unreal, would be 16 bits. Red has 8, green has 8. Okay. If I'm dealing with a red, green, and blue image, I've got 8, 8, and 8, which is 24 bits per pixel. If I'm dealing with an alpha channel, I've got 8, 8, 8, and 8, which is 32 bits per pixel. If you do not change that, it won't export that channel out. So you won't get this alpha channel when you need it. You'll get the image, but you won't get the alpha channel. So you want to make sure that your target is set to be 32 pixels per inch. All right. Now, if I save this thing out as a ping, show you how that one's done. Ping, a PNG file is right there. Okay. You'll notice the alpha channels is not accurate. It's not turned on. If I click save in here, it's going to go ahead and do it anyway, because ping will automatically add that alpha channel in there. All right. So you don't have to worry about it like you do in Targa. It's going to automatically take care of it for you. There we go. In fact, in Photoshop, if you look under your image, what was it, mode here, it is an RGB image, and it says right down here 8 bits per channel. Don't ever change those. 8 bits per channel. That lets you know that it's 8 for the red, 8 for the green, 8 for the blue, 8 for the alpha, and you got it. All right. So that's taken care of on that. So what I did then was I imported that image in here. The texture is called, this is a different one, but it works the same, Decal. All right, I imported it in, and it comes in with that transparency out over here. So we've got it all set. All right. And I don't want to have time for it. So it'll come in, it'll be all set. So I'm going to be using a different one for this, but it's going to work. All right. Then what we need to do is we need to create a material. So I'm going to select it, right click, and I'm going to go ahead and go create material. And it's going to import that material for me automatically. It's right there. Pull this back out of the way. Okay. So there is my base material. Now, let's look back over here at this one and see how this is going to work. And this is probably the best thing you can do is put it, I'm going to put it on the box here so I can see it. You can probably put it on a plane too. Plane would work. Either one of them is going to work. I just want to make sure that my opacity is going to work here when I do it. All right. Now, let's look and see kind of what we have. Let's check what our main node is right here. Okay. Surface deferred decal. We are creating a deferred decal. So our blend mode, or excuse me, our material domain is going to become deferred decal. And this is going to change. The first thing that you'll notice is opacity lit up. All right, so there's opacity. So my opacity channel is stored inside of this image. Remember, I have a red image, green, a blue, and I have that alpha channel. And I'm going to take my alpha channel and I'm going to bring it over here and I'm going to plug it into opacity. And you go, well, it's not working. Why is it not working? And the reason that it's not working is, remember what opacity is for? Opacity is for actually dealing with transparency. I'm not dealing with transparency. I'm dealing with a mask. That's right there, and it's not available to me. That's because I need to change this from translucent. I need to change it to something a little bit different. All right? So it's not really going to be normal. It's not going to be emissive. I need to change this thing down here because I'm going to be using a normal map with this. I created a normal map that goes with this one. All right? So what my translucent has to be is it's going to become debuffer translucent color with normal. Okay? That's the way that this one's going to work because I'm going to need to have a normal map in here. Now, I got a little bit ahead of myself. All right? Let's go back and notice why does it say opacity and it doesn't say opacity mask, and why is it that I can't change it? All right? The reason I can't change it is because you must first change that opaque to masked before you go in and change it to a deferred decal. It's weird, but that's kind of what you got to do. And it's still doing it. Okay. It might still show up in here no matter what. I think it does it when you go out to the opacity, when you go out to deal with the decal. All right? So now I also have a normal map for this. So let me kind of pull this down. And let's grab my normal map and pull it up in here and drop it in. And my normal map is going to get wired directly into normal. So I end up with something that really looks like it's got raised areas on it. It gives you a really nice, you can really see it there in the lighting. It gives you this really nice effect. All right. Then that's why I have to have debuffer translucent color normal. If I had this set at translucent, which is what it was, okay, the normal map doesn't work as well. So I need to make sure that that decal blend mode is set to be able to handle the normal aspect of it, so I'm going to do that. And we'll click Save. All right, so what we'll do is we're going to go ahead, I've got that saved up, and we'll go ahead and we'll close that down. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and we're going to create a decal here in our scene. We'll show you how to do that and how we're going to apply that material. Now remember, this decal material, okay, doesn't look like it has opacity, but that's going to be handled when we get out here in the scene. So to get a decal, what we do is we're going to go down to Visual Effects here in our node panel under the place. We're going to go to Visual Effects. At the bottom of that list is something called a deferred decal. And we're going to just click and we're going to drag it out here and drop it into our scene. All right. And let's zoom back here a little bit and take a look at that. And you're going to go, what the hell is that giant box? Well, what that giant box is, remember I mentioned it, or I described this in the beginning, as being a projection. All right? And so this is a projection of a texture. And if you look at this thing, let's zoom in a little bit, you'll notice that there is a blue arrow right here. If I zoom in a little bit more, that sticks out of the red one. You see this little blue arrow sticking out of the red one? What that is the direction that we are projecting. So what I want to do is I want to go ahead and click on rotate. I hit the space bar to get my rotate tool, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. 90 degrees. All right, and let's go back, and I'm going to go ahead and get back to my regular tool, and let's kind of play with this thing here for a second. You can see I can pick this thing up and I can move it around. Okay, it's huge. We don't want it to be that big. But I need to show you what this box is so you have an understanding of how this thing works. You notice that like if I lift the box up away from the ground, the texture goes away. Okay, the arrow that's coming down here is the direction it is projecting that image, but imagine it's only projecting it at the bottom of that box. So it's only projecting it down here on the bottom of this box that surrounds that thing. And if I pick it up and slide it down, as soon as that box overlaps the ground plane, the texture appears. And you can see I've got opacity around there. I'm not getting those outer edges. It's working really well. Okay. Now, when you're scaling this thing down, I would suggest what you do is you use the scale tools over here on the right. You'll notice it says 128, 256, and 256. Now, it's 256 units wide, 256 units long. It's 128 units high. I'm going to make this maybe, let's do 64 by 64. And then it doesn't need to be that big, that high. I'm going to make it 64 as well. And then what I can do is I can come in and I can pick that up and I can kind of move it anywhere I want. And I can also rotate it, because those things usually aren't rotated exactly the way they're supposed to be. They're usually put down into the ground in all kinds of ways. And I've got this really nice manhole cover that's going down here, and it is taking on its own UVW map. Excuse me, its own normal map. Now remember, what I did in here was I set this to be debuffer, translucent, color, normal, and roughness. What this does is this allows that normal map to override the normal map that exists on the asphalt. If I look at the asphalt material here, it has its own normal map. Okay, if I just projected this thing down onto the ground, what I would get would be I would have that asphalt material coming through my manhole cover. But it has its own normal map, and that's overridden by using that translucent normal map setting in there, the debuffer, that allows that to take over and do that. Now, it's going to be different when I work with something on the wall. When I work with something on the wall, I'm not going to want that, because I want that texture to come through. If I have blood splattered on the wall, I want that texture of the wall to come through. Now, cool thing about, well, I'll show you that when we get to the wall, but these are wonderful things. This is another way that we can use to hide seams. I got a little bit of a seam still appearing up here on top of this thing. I'm not quite sure why. I've got a little dark seam right there, and you'll notice I only painted on the front. I didn't paint the backside of that. If I wanted to go back with my Vertex paint, I can paint the backside of that. I'm getting a little bit of a seam overlap up there, but I think for the most part that's okay. I'm only looking at that side of the wall anyway. So there's my first decal. You can always spot the decals. They've got this little folded over disc, and you know that you've got a decal attached to that. All right, now here's another image that I have. Close that down, and let's open up the blood splatter. So we'll go down through here and we'll look for my decals, and I got blood 2. This is a ping file, and there it is. All right, so this is a blood splatter that I've got that I want to use, and I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to lighten this up a little bit. I'd like to have it be a little bit more, there we go, not quite so much. Not quite so much of the red in there. There we go, maybe something about like that. We'll do this, and then I'm going to go in and I'm going to adjust the colors a little bit more so they're a little bit more vibrant. I know you're not seeing this, but that's okay. There, you'll see that one. Let's add some saturation. We'll darken it up just a little bit, and see if I can play with that color. Yeah, that's pretty good. Change that color just a little bit. All right. Now, my layers, I just have that single layer there. I do not have a channel behind this for my opacity. Now, the way that I normally do this one is I go ahead and I'm going to copy this entire image. I hit Control A and Control C. I copy that entire image. In my channels, I'm going to add a new channel, and then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to fill that with white, and then I'm going to paste that down on top of it. So that was kind of quick, but what I did was I went to my RGB image, I did Control A, Control C, I copied the entire thing. I then went and created a new alpha channel. All right. And I think I'll delete that. Okay. So what I did was my new alpha channel, I went Control A. I gotta go back and do that again. So go back to here, Control A for select all, Control C for copy. I created a new alpha channel. I'm going to fill it with white. That was Alt backspace. and then I'm going to do Control V to paste. All right, now I did it on a white background, and it came in as black, or gray, even though I did it in black in color. It's because the alpha channel, again, is only black and white. So it's going to bring that image in, and it's going to do that. Now, this is really the only thing I am concerned with. I'm really not concerned about that RGB channel out there at all. That's actually just going to do nothing but get in the way, and you'll see that here in a second. So this is what I want, and I'm going to go in now, and I'm going to adjust this. So I have... I need this to be as black and white as possible. Okay. What is going to happen is black is going to become the color that goes on the wall. White is going to go invisible. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to click OK on that. That's a nice dark image. So you're going to see blood wherever there's black. Wherever there's white, you're not going to see anything. Wherever you see gray colors, if there's like some things that are still gray, that's going to give a little bit of opacity. You're going to see kind of a reddish tint, but you're not going to see actual solid red. And that looks pretty good. All right. So I'm going to go back up here to my alpha channel. This is irrelevant, and you'll see why here in a second. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go in and I'm going to get a color, a nice blood red color, right in through there. All right, and I'm going to fill this entire image with that color. All right, and then I'm going to go File, Save As. I'm going to make this a Targa, okay, with an alpha channel. I'm going to call this one Blood 3. I've already got the Blood 2 over there. Blood 3, Targa. I'm going to click Save. And I've already got 3 in there also. Hang on, let's just do Blood Splat. I don't have one of those things in there. And we'll click Save. And again, 32 bits per pixel, 8, 8, 8, and 8. Click OK. And we're done with that image. I'm not going to save that from the original one. All right. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to bring that image in. And I have to go hunt that. So that was LOD test. We'll just go up a level from there. We'll go to bloodsplat.targa. There it is. All right. And it's just this big red thing right there. And I'm going to go ahead and right click and let's turn that into a material, and we'll call this one M_bloodsplat because that's the name of the texture. And then we'll open it up. All right, now what kind of a texture is that? Well, remember I have an opacity channel in there, but I don't have anything here. All right, so what I'm going to do is the same thing. I'm going to go ahead and leave that opaque. It'll switch over. I'm going to make that a deferred decal. I'm going to pull my opacity over here to opacity, not normal. Been a long day. All right, and you would think, well, but what about the image? Well, remember, that's really all I need to see. And in this particular case, what I'm not going to do is I'm going to leave this as translucent. Okay, for right now I'm going to leave that as translucent. I do not want to go down and select normal because I don't really have a normal to override that. In fact, I think what I'll do just to save time, you're going to go to debuffer, translucent color. Okay, I'm going to get that nice red color. Okay, save that up. And we'll go ahead and close that. Now it's still selected. So if it's still selected in here, right there, and I come back out and I bring in another decal, it's going to then automatically use that material. So all I need to do again here is to go in and rotate that thing. Let's rotate it 90 degrees. Okay. Okay, I stopped my videotaping there for a second because I couldn't figure out why the material didn't come into it. It didn't come in, so I'm going to go ahead and add it in now. So my blood splat material is going to get dropped into my decal slot over here. like I said, usually what happens is when you have a material selected and then you either create an asset or create something in the scene, it automatically gets that material. For whatever reason, it didn't actually do it this time. All right. So let's look at this thing and see what's going on. So what is happening here is I've actually got a reverse or an inverse image because of the way I created my object back over here. So if I go back and open up my, well, I didn't save it. So if I went back and opened it up, I created it where I had black out over here and I had white, and so I have a reverse image. So let's show you how you can fix that. One, you can go back into Photoshop and you can actually invert that. So I can come back over here, let's say open, and we'll get blood splat. There, look at that channel, and I forgot to invert it, so I would have to go in here and type in Control-I, because again, I want black to be invisible and do that. But I think what we can do is I can show you a little trick here for working with blood splat, that if I go in here, there is something called you basically do the same thing that I did before, which was to invert that channel. I can go in there and type in Control-I to invert it and switch them around. In here, it is called a 1-. And if I go in and type 1-, I get that. And let's see if this won't work. What a 1- does is it takes an object and it inverts it. Bingo. All right. So what I did was I managed to get that thing inverted. So there's two ways that you can do that. If you ever have an image where you need to go back and you need to make it be the opposite of what it is, if it's a color, it'll make it an inverted copy of that color. So whatever it is on the color wheel, it will go the opposite. If it's a black and white image, it's a way that you can go in and invert the black and white. This is taking up a little bit more memory, not much, but a little bit. I suppose if I went back and fixed the image and brought it in, that would be ideal. But in a pinch, this thing works pretty well and does exactly the same thing. It's called a 1-, and it's an inversion factor. So we'll save that up again. And by the way, saving, if you move anything, like I just moved that a little bit, if I go to close it, it's going to ask me if I want to save it. You can say yes, you can say no, it doesn't really matter. So there is my object here, and it's a little bit big, and it's projecting pretty well. So let's go in and show you we can scale that whole thing down. Okay, I'm not too worried about the disappearing on there because I know what it's doing. I'm going to go back over here and I'm going to make that, I think I did 40 by 40. And then what I need to do on this is I need to come in and I need to also rotate it because that arrow has to be facing towards the wall. And then I will pull it over and then we'll just make that interact with the wall. And I've got a blood stain or a blood smattering on the wall. Bingo. All right, now, last thing I want to show you, and you can use this to hide, you know, a seam, I suppose. I've got that kind of, that seam going up over there. Decals wrap around objects. So I can kind of pull that up there, and it kind of hides the fact that there's a seam up there, and yet you notice it looks like it's wrapping around it. It does a pretty good job of that. So I can do that. I can create multiples of those, and I can pick them up, and I can move them around. And I've got, you know, a blood stain and a blood splatter going on the wall. You can also, here, let me go back and show you this thing one more time. Let's say you didn't want red. What if you were shooting aliens, and you wanted an alien green blood splat on a wall? How would you go in and how would you do that? Well, that's pretty simple. Okay, I got my 1- in here. The 1- is the important thing on that one. I'm going to break that link because that's my red plate. So that's showing a red material. If I break that and then come back up here, and let's pull those down a little bit, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type in a constant 3, hold down the 3 and bring that in. I'm going to go over to here. Let's click that and let's give ourselves this really gross, vibrant green. like that. And if I wire that into my base color, that's now going to be the color of the blood splat. And this is only acting as the opacity channel. So I've got that. All right. Now, what other changes can I make to that? Well, I can make it glow. I've already learned how to make something glow, how to make something illuminated. I can go in and do that, except you can't actually make a decal glow. So that won't work. But what I can do is I can go in here and I can go and change the vibrancy of the color. I can hold down 1 and get a constant 1 vector. I can hold down M and get a multiply. And I can multiply that green by a value. 0 is black. Okay. If I go in and type in 5, you're going to get like a tint of it. If I go in there and say, let's make that 1, that's going to be the full color of that thing. If I wanted it to be a little bit darker, I can say, let's make that 0.5. And I'm going to get a little darker green out of that one, or maybe a 0.3. Get a little darker green and click Save. And I started with that color, and I'm able to go in and make changes to it. So I get something that looks a little bit different on the wall. Okay. I got this one over here. Gotta make sure that I got everything the same. Debuffer, translucent. Everything is the same as this one right here. Nope. Debuffer, translucent color. Okay. What that's going to do is it's going to make it more opaque. So now it's a little bit more opaque. So translucent is going to leave it kind of see-through, so you can actually see the stuff coming through. If I slide this over to here, you can kind of see what you're seeing is you're not seeing the brick. What you are seeing is you're seeing the brick normal. So I'm hiding the texture of the brick, but the normal is still coming through. All right. So that's kind of what's happening when you're dealing with those down over here. Debuffer, translucent color. If I go debuffer, translucent color, normal, and save that, you're really not going to see much of a difference out there. If I go back and say, let's go back and make that translucent, then what you get is you get a little bit of a see-through. You're going to see the stucco, you're going to see the brick, and you're going to see all the normal maps involved in that. But it looks kind of washed out. But you can go back and play with those and kind of do with them as you wish. But that is a decal and how a decal works. Decals can be as complicated as you want. I have seen buildings where it is just a large box with a wall texture on it, and all of the windows and doors that you don't have to interact with are all just decals. I've seen people in the distance, like they look like NPCs, they're just decals. You can do all kinds of things with decals, and you can add as many of them as you want. You can put posters on a wall, pictures on a wall, you can put leaves on the ground, you can put cracks and crevices for the asphalt. You can go in and find oil stains or make your own oil stains and just bring them in and project them. You can overlap decals on top of each other. I can take that decal and bring it back in here and overlap the ground. I'll have a decal of a blood splatter on top of a decal of a manhole cover on top of a ground plane. So you can mix and match and really do a nice job of combining elements together. So look into decals, experiment with them, see what you can come up with. If you got some Photoshop skills, the sky is the limit as to what you can do with a decal.